Okay, so another week, another episode of the Orville, and we're almost at the end of the road. As always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review. I'm going to be talking about the Orville Season 3, Episode 9, Domino. So if you haven't seen it, you know. Let's say we're getting towards the end of the season, and I'm not really that worried, but I'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this episode, not as long as last week, but still over an hour. A lot of familiar story tropes here from Star Trek, various films, 09, Into Darkness, some Return of the Jedi battle stuff, so a good mix of Trek and Wars if that's your thing. Which, considering you're watching a channel right now called The Geek In Review, it probably is, and you should probably like and subscribe as well, because it's just a second, why not? But yeah, really interesting start with the Krills and the Mocklins forming their own alliance. So, you know that that's not going to be a good thing for the Union, and this is the fallout I was talking about from last week's episodes. But remember, the Krill leader is female, so Mocklins be Mocklins, and they go at each other. And I know I said I was sick of seeing the Mocklins last week, but it was nice to see the Krill stick it to them. I still think the Mocklins are overused in this show, but this episode wasn't that bad. I liked it, it didn't rely on them too much. Like I say, there was a lot going on. And what an opener, we get some super sexy ship action, you know that I love that. And as well as that, they've got a sexy new weapon too that makes mincemeat or metal meat or whatever out of a Kaylon fleet. So this is a bit of a game changer when it comes to the conflict between the Union and the Kaylon. And I like, even though they're machines, there's a sense of weight to what they've just done from Ed. They've killed hundreds, maybe even thousands in a single shot. We've had a lot of very serious episodes with very big questions this season, and could it do with a bit of lighterness and a bit of, you know, comedy here and there? Absolutely, but it doesn't take anything away from how good the show is at the moment. At least in my opinion, for what it's worth. So basically they've worked out how to exploit the Kaylon's connection, so no matter which direction they fire in, the weapon is only going to be effective against the Kaylon, overloading them, blowing up their ships. So it's really an Oppenheimer vibe here, and Ed brings up that the end result of this, if the Kaylon don't want to negotiate or surrender, would be genocide. And yeah man, like I say, big questions as always. And this is where the sort of pace of this episode for me gets a bit all over the place. Let's say it's over an hour, but it's not as long as last week's. And if you're asking me, I would have rather have swapped last week's length for this episode. There's a lot of stuff going on here that they sort of get into, but they don't explore too much. The first one being the moral implications of using this weapon and having the technology. Although the Orville's doing its own thing this season, it can't escape getting compared to Star Trek, and some of the logic problems that pop up in this episode are very new Trek. Again, at least in my opinion. Straight away, they decide to show the weapon to the Kaylon again rather than using it, hoping that their machine logic's going to dictate that they'll see that they can't win and surrender. But that seems like one of many bad ideas that's going to come up. Showing how your advantage works, you don't hold a gun at a guy and tell him you don't have any bullets left. Well, at least that's not something that I do. If that's something that you do, let me know in the comments below. But when they go to the Kaylon homeworld, that, again, the CGI in this show is pretty heavy and pretty amazing. It did remind me of the scene of Neo and Trinity going to the Machine City in the last Matrix film. Well, you know, the third in the trilogy, let's not get into the Matrix Resurrections. If you've seen me reviewing that, you know how I feel. But then the logic problems pop back up because the Kaylon realise they can't win and they decide to let the Orville land on the planet. So yeah, you know, from the Orville's point of view, they're landing the only weapon that they have in the heart of enemy territory. And then from the Kaylon point of view, it doesn't make sense because they've just let their enemy with a nuclear weapon in the boot of their car park in their garage, essentially. And what happened if they did land on the planet and somehow the Kaylon were able to overwhelm the Orville crew? yeah, this wouldn't work out well for particularly anyone, and although it sort of goes with the flow of the episode, the logic of this just didn't really land for me. Of course, the K1 realise that they can't win, so they're forced to surrender, and they admit that they're going to look for a way to beat this weapon, and of course they are. They're machines that don't sleep or eat, and there's millions of them, so having millions of people working towards the one goal that don't really need to take a rest, they're going to solve that problem pretty quick. It's not going to take them that long. So, should the Union have made a bit more of a statement in using this weapon? I don't know, but I don't think they should have parked it in their backyard. And a forced peace can't really last, and Charlie's the only character that doesn't think that this is a good idea. And I hate to say it, folks, but it is quite a Charlie heavy episode in points. I'll get to that in a second. But from then on out, it all goes Star Trek into darkness, with some Union officers going rogue and stealing the weapon from Union Central and giving it to the Krill and the new Moclan Alliance. And I was wondering what was going on here. I thought, yes, we're getting some dark Section 31 stuff from the Union in this show. And this show does raise a lot of, morally grey areas that Star Trek's sort of afraid to go into. While you could say the show is a little bit more preachy and heavy-handed than Star Trek, I do think it handles these things a lot more successfully. But this thing didn't really work out. Admiral Perry, aka Ted Danson, just hands the device over, and then as soon as they've got it, quite rightly so, they kill him, because they don't want him running back, alerting them to the plans of what they're going to be up to. So yeah, I would have liked a bit more expansion on this and the motives, and a bit more debate among the Orville crew and the Union about was this the right thing to do or not, because you get that sort of backdoor politics that goes on and things like that that's not done in the public eye. So yeah, maybe a missed opportunity here, but not a huge one, so don't worry about it. And it did remind me a little bit of Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country as well, with the Klingons and the Romulans and the Federation, and that not everyone that was part of those organisations or those races was happy with the peace that was coming. So I get that. Sometimes you don't want to change to the status quo that you know, and it's better the enemy that you know than the one you don't, I suppose. But again, going back to the logic problems, why would they only build the one device? Surely you would at least have a backup, or a semi-functional backup for spare parts if you needed it. The US just didn't build one nuclear warhead and drop it onto Japan, and yeah man, again, didn't really work for me, I'm afraid. And I was kind of worried after this that it was going to go into side quest territory of them having to hunt down the weapon, but it sort of takes a bit more of a swing than that, in that the Union tries to recruit the Kalon to fight the Moclans and the Krill, which yeah, not a fan of, and they come up with this Return of the Jedi Death Star indoor multiple attacks with space and land idea, and you know what I'm talking about. And we finally see them use the fighter, the one from the first episode that I mentioned last week. Doesn't matter if you've not seen it, but go back and check it out. And the battle scene, I think it's something like 12 or 13 minutes long, and it is non-stop. And while the CGI does look solid, again, it does just rely too much on that Star Wars sort of final battle vibe for me. And some of the actors that were in the sort of CGI piloting scenes in the fighters didn't look that comfortable with the CGI. In fact, I would say Scott Grimes was the only one that, when I was looking at it, I thought he fits in. The rest of them just felt to be a little bit jarring. And it's only 3 or 4 guys we're talking about here. It doesn't really ruin the episode per se, because the rest of it, as I say, looks absolutely fantastic. But once they start the sort of battle on the land, they're trying to get the team of Kelly and all that to disarm the weapon, the whole space battle's forgotten about, and again, bit of a missed opportunity for me. It did feel a little bit muddy. This show is certainly setting a standard for TV CGI. It's not up there with The Mandalorian, because that's the tip top. It'll be very interesting to see where that Lord of the Rings show lands when it comes out, because we've had some hits and misses in CGI from Marvel and Disney, but so far, apart from a few scenes and a few episodes, the Orville is pretty much nailing it every week. So yeah, they do the whole Rebels on Endor thing and infiltrating the base, and I've not watched it back, but I'm pretty sure that's the same base corridors that the Mocklins were using last week that they've redressed it. And again, that's going back to an old Star Trek tradition of reusing sets, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But man, these guys love a phaser fight or a laser fight or whatever you're going to call it in a corridor this season. And the big sort of twist to take away from the episode is Charlie has to sacrifice herself so that the rest of them can get out and they can stop the weapon going off and stopping the genocide of the Kaylons. So yeah, I suppose that's a character arc. You know, I've not been the biggest fan of Charlie for various reasons, and if they just brought this character on to tell that story, that's kind of fair enough. I'm glad that they didn't keep her around too long, but at the same time, you're taking valuable time and storytelling time away from like Lamar, Gordon, Bortus, Kelly. Some of the characters, especially Lamar and Kiali, haven't really got that much focus beyond the side stories this season. And from a pretty well balanced show, that's a bit of a shame, but it's not well balanced all the time, and I think this episode is probably the least balanced out of the lot of them. There was just so many good ideas and plot points that they could have explored over a season, let alone a single episode or several episodes. I don't like that it was all crammed in. I also don't like the way that they're sort of tying things up, because the Kaylon have now seen the error of their ways and they've sort of joined the Union, so it feels like they're wrapping a lot up here, and this episode felt like a season finale rather than the second last one. So without a season 3 announcement, does this mean that they're going to tie everything up in a pretty bow, or are we going to get a cliffhanger for the finale? What do you guys think? I mean, I hope that you want the Orville to get another season, but if it didn't, how happy would you be about that? Because it seems that everything's kind of been tight. But yeah, there was a lot of things that worked about this episode, and there was a lot of things that didn't. It did just feel that the story was just pushing towards tying up this whole thing with the Kaylons, but then you've got the new dynamic of the Krill and the Mocklins. But then again, you've got the name New Horizons, and we're still not really getting that, in my opinion. And some other things I didn't like is, I mentioned it last week, we're getting too many sweeping ship shots, and they're maybe 5 or 10 seconds too long. I know that's a bit of a small gripe, but if you take that off every episode or every scene over an entire season, that's going to save you and cut out a lot of time. Another thing I wasn't a fan of is when they were on Aaron Earth, did we need the full song or another song this week after the Dolly Parton one last week? Again, it just reminds me of like Grey's Anatomy and all those sort of drama shows and CW shows that have to end on a 3.5 minute pop song. And when they got to Earth, why the hell are they all hanging out together in their downtime? They've just spent months. In fact, Isaac says he's known Charlie for about a year, or just under a year. I think it's 257 days, he said. So why would the rest of them want to spend time in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere when they've been on a ship out in the middle of nowhere? You'd want to kick back and relax yourself, or is that just me? But I did like that we got to see more of Earth and the Union. I say this about Star Trek, but we need to see how this world works, and Star Trek has kind of lent off Earth over all of the seasons of its shows. We still don't really understand how the politics of the world works, and the Orville's only 3 seasons in, and this episode really established how the Union works. But yeah, while I wasn't a fan of the pace of this episode, generally it was pretty good. These are just my own personal gripes and likes at the end of the day. But what did you guys think? Is the Orville getting ready to wrap up? Are we getting another season? And are you glad that Charlie's dead? Let me know in the comments below. If you've made it this far, please leave a like on the video, and if you haven't done it already, please subscribe to the channel. It's just one small click for you. It takes 2 seconds and it means the absolute world to me. My name's Al, as always, thanks for watching.